It's been a long road to 7nm mid-range cards, hasn't it? Actually, it's been a long road to decent mid-range cards in general. I mean, it's not just Navi. If you really think about it, people, we haven't had decent mid-range cards that were anything more than either rebrands or the exact same cards as Polaris and Pascal at the sub $350 price point for years. I mean, Polaris came out, it was okay, and then the mining boom, and then the mining boom, and then the mining boom, and then Turing. But we're finally there again, and that's what this review will focus on, how we have finally gotten back to a place where you can get a around $300 graphics card that is substantially better than what we used to be able to buy. Now, first of all, before I get deep into this review, it's important to immediately tell you where I'm coming from when I review this card. I'm a creator, right? I do editing for podcasts, multiple podcasts, Fiverr States and Broken Silicon. I do video editing. I do a few other hobbyist things and mining. If it can't do the non-gaming tasks better, I'm not really interested. Now, in fact, who is this graphics card for? Well, in my opinion, this is for the type of people that typically buy higher end mid-range cards. Let me explain, right? This isn't for people who buy an RX 470. I don't think it is, right? I think those people might want to wait for the RX 5600 XT. No, this is for people who got things like a 7870 XT. That was a thing. That was a limited edition 7870. That was really a cut down 7950. That, or maybe a 660 Ti 3 gigabyte, maybe one of those ones with crazy fast RAM that was almost a 670. The upper mid-range cards. That's who this is for. Maybe an RX 590 person, because those are really about $300 around when they came out. This is for someone who has an RX 590 and wants to upgrade. Those people. I immediately booted this up to play the Division 2, Battlefield 5, Sekiro. I didn't benchmark it right away. I just wanted to plug the thing in, get it stable with a modest overclock like I usually do, and then just really stretch its legs, just see what my initial impressions are. And it did feel about 20 to 30% weaker than my Radeon 7, even if I didn't see the FPS counter. It felt weaker. However, it did not feel horribly weak. The way I would say is it felt comparable to a Vega 64. Now, as a mid-range card, it was using like 150 watts. I had the power usage pulled up next to it most of the time. This thing was therefore very quiet. It was 90 degrees outside while I was gaming, and it didn't heat up my room. That was very, very nice. Additionally, it felt insanely responsive, especially after a few reboots of my PC. My God, the Radeon settings now, you just click and fly through them, moving and adjusting settings. I have an NVIDIA laptop, of course, and anyone considering if it's a tie in performance, you want AMD for the better software, guys. It is so much smoother. And I did give it a very modest overclock. If you see here, because they've kind of locked this down compared to the 5700 XT, you can basically just take the stock voltage, crank it up to 1850, crank the memory all the way up, and then test it. I ended up bumping it a tad down for ultimate reliability while I was using it, but that's basically all I did. And I did a modest overclock on purpose. I didn't push it to its limits with registry mods because, well, frankly, I think that would be unfair. I didn't have to do that with my Vega card, so why should I have to do that with this? And you'll see that, well, my Radeon 7 has a somewhat aggressive overclock. It's not pushed past 2 gigahertz with the fans cranked all the way up in a cold room. This is the overclock settings I use for 24/7 gameplay, and the same goes for my Vega 64. The Vega 64 I used for over a year straight at those settings, 24/7 stable. I opened up Wattman. clicked a few settings, and that's what I use. And so that's what I will do with Navi. But let's get to some benchmarking here. My Radeon 7 review, I actually opened up with mining performance and some professional stuff, and that's because that's what that card's meant for. There's no RX in Radeon 7. People evaluating it solely as a gaming card are making the same mistake as someone who evaluates Threadripper only for gaming. It's not for gaming, guys. Come on. But this one is for gaming. This is a gaming card. So, without further ado, let's get straight into the gaming benchmarks. So first up in my roster is Deus Ex Mankind Divided. I still think this is a gorgeous DX12 game that in certain sections comes pretty close to photorealism. And let's see, as you'll notice, this is basically going to be the theme. The 5700 is a bit better than Vega 64 at stock. However, if you undervolt and overclock Vega 64, it really does push itself much further than the modest overclock you would get from a 5700 in Wattman. However, this is right next to a 2070. Right next to a 2070 for $200 less dollars. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious. Next up is Ghost Recon Wildlands. I continue to use this because it is an excellent test of geometry performance and not stupid geometry performance. This isn't Crysis 2, where they render an entire ocean that you can't even see underground. No, this has an insane view distance. And we see, as usual, beating the Vega 64 at stock by quite a bit, actually. But then look how much ahead Vega 64 pushes. Over 20%. 20% gain in Vega 64. When you really push it. And again, 2070 for less money. Next up, Far Cry 5. Very popular titles, the Far Cry series. Again, a bit above a Vega 64 at stock. Next to a 2070. But if you overclock a Vega 64, it's almost a 1080 Ti. And that's just never going to happen with this 5700. And, of course, Strange Brigade, one of the most optimized DirectX 12 titles I've seen. This is one of those games where you go, oh, finally DirectX 12 is here to a certain extent. And Vega 64, again below it, next to the 2070, overclocked Vega 64 wins. Now, I do think it's worth pointing out, my Vega 64, I believe, is a very good yield, right? I'm using the best of about 8 Vega cards I have mining. About 2 launch Vega 64s are of those, and they usually get the best yield. So that's worth pointing out. My Vega 64 is a better one, but I think even with registry mods, power modding the 5700, you're not gonna really get a better experience than the Vega 64 that came out in 2017. But it costs a lot more. Usually uses substantially more energy. And moving on to the Division 2, I think probably the best showcase of DirectX 12 performance. My God, this game looks fantastic and runs so well for the graphics performance. This is, of course, one of AMD's best games to show off. And let's see. Yeah, all right. So I guess in this one game, the 5700 beats the 1080 Ti, which should make people take pause when they consider getting a used one. No one should be buying a 1080 Ti in 2019 unless it's $300, guys. I'm not saying it's not overall stronger, but hey guys, this uses like 150 to 180 watts while you're gaming. 1080 Ti is using like 250. Don't be an idiot. And as usual, Vega pulls ahead. So that's pretty interesting. I'd say overall, though, you can see this is basically a little bit better Vega 64. And let's get to the relative performance compared to Vega 64 in 1440p. This really completely demonstrates my point. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit stronger at stock on average. It's within 2% of a 2070. Again, guys, that's almost to the point of negligible. Well, it is negligible. The 5700 is the same performance as a 2070. And if you give it that modest boom, takes 10 seconds overclock, it pulls a bit ahead. But it's still not up there. It's still a good 5% weaker than a Vega 64, a good one. But I gotta say, that's within 10% of a 1080 Ti, people. 10% of a 1080 Ti that used to cost double what you can get. Well, more than double what you can get RX 5700s for right now. But yeah, people who own Radeon 7s, you're not getting the same performance for less power usage. It's more efficient than Radeon 7, but not that much, really. And then, of course, in 4K, it falls back a little bit more, feeling more like a Vega 64. But, of course, the 2070 doesn't really gain on it at all. Still 2% away. And if we look at this overclocked, Vega 64 does pull ahead by just a little bit more there. Same with the 1080 Ti with its 11 gigabyte buffer. And, of course, in 4K, the Radeon 7 absolutely creams the 5700, even after overclocking. I mean, what is that? 1, 2... 3, like 35-40% stronger. Even a 5700 XT overclocked ain't getting to a Radeon 7 in 4K, at least not in the newest titles. So, I got through my thoughts for gaming performance while we were looking at the charts, but let's say you skip past them. Again, I'll say it one more time. This right here, this is a 2070. This is a 2070 for substantially less money. And I'll get into where I think the price is going to go soon, but as of this recording, it's $330 on Newegg right now. That's right. Already, you can get this for what the price of mini 580s and 590s were on Newegg a year ago. So this is quite exciting. And I don't know if the floor is that high, actually. I could see this drifting all the way to $300 by Christmas. I don't think there's going to be a mining boom that makes this take off. Actually, on that subject, I know there are a lot of you worried about if a new mining boom will destroy this. In fact, it was conversations with Chris at the Good Old Gamer where he helped hook me up with Timotech to send me this card to see if I could get it to mine. That was actually the point of why I was sent this card, to see if I could get it to mine, because I have, let me see, there's a mining rig there, my desktop mines, got 1, 2 mining rigs in the laundry room still, and then I got a derelict rig upstairs that's just installed, ready to go. If a new mining boom happened, I could just order 5 cards and hook them up like that and run. No need to install anything. That's the type of miner I am, and I've been doing it since 2013. So the truth is, if I can't get this to mine, I don't think it's coming. And I cannot get this to mine. It has problems with PCIe risers due to its PCIe 4.0 signaling. I believe some people have gotten it to work, but there's mixed results out there. So right off the bat, AMD didn't try to make this work well with cheaper PCIe risers. If you have a high-end one, it sounds like it's fine. But if you have one of these $5 ones we like using, it doesn't work. And furthermore, Dan assisted me with this. He's my co-host on Broken Silicon. We cannot find anyone who's getting this working, mining basically anything. One guy got it to mine Ethereum at 4 mega hash. An RX 560 can get 16, guys. It doesn't seem like they're close. It doesn't seem like they're close at all to getting this to work mining. It'll probably be at least another month. Of course, I could be wrong. Could come a day after I do this review, and they're just like, I get a bazillion mega hash, but I doubt it. This is a new architecture. It's going to be, I think, like it might not be till 2020 that they actually get this working well. And when they do get it working, I think everyone knows it's probably just going to do about as well as a Vega 56 after tweaking anyways. So there's no motivation. There's no motivation to program this well, especially, I know there's a new boom in the price of Bitcoin going on, but guys, altcoins are dying. They're useless shitcoin bullshit. And everyone's basically figuring that out by now. So if you know Ethereum's not going to be here in 2 years, if you know it's going to take an enormous amount of work to get this to work, mining, and if you know this probably still won't be better than Vega 56, why? What's the motivation to program this to mine well? Eventually it probably will, but I just don't see this being a threat. Gamers rejoice. The price should drift towards $300, and I don't think this is going to have another mining boom. I think we're fine. And in fact, that's not really a surprise, is it? I mean, GCN has been the mining standard since the 7000 series. And the 7000 series could actually share a lot of its code with Terascale before it. The 6000, 5000 series were also very popular mining generations back in 2013. I know by then we already had the 7000 series, but hey, my first mining rig was 6850s and 6870s. I know a lot of people that did that as well. And they had ample time to get GCN working well with any new algorithms until now. RDNA is a new architecture, and I just don't It's just not easy to get working there. Oh, and I was going to do a bunch of testing for some of my professional tasks, but I'm going to cut to the chase here, guys. All this work I did testing my Radeon 7 with the timeline I use with my video editor and encoding was a waste because this doesn't work with whatever my encoder is. So I don't know what to tell you. And in fact, it isn't as smooth even with the timeline as before. I basically had to just not use the graphics card while editing. So I think it's about time to wrap up this review, isn't it? What's my overall take? Well, not your mining card. And it definitely isn't the professional card. I will be editing together this video on my oh so beloved Radeon 7 because that's what that card's meant for. That's not what this card is meant for. This card is just meant for gaming, right? And it's very good at it. It felt insanely smooth. The frame pacing was, I feel like, slightly better than even my Radeon 7, which is known for having excellent frame pacing. It was incredibly responsive. I could feel those latency optimizations they made for Navi. Once again, I can tell that little bit of difference. This is an excellent mid-range graphics card. And in fact, what's so funny is, you know what this card for me really proves? I've been saying on my channel for the longest time that the 2070 is actually a mid-range card. And if you want to be harsh, almost the lower end of a mid-range card. And you know what this is? The same strength as the 2070 on a tiny 251 millimeter square die. This proves that the RTX 2070 is mid-range and should have cost $330 at most. Well, $330 is what this costs now. So it's a bit late to the party, at least in terms of how long people had to wait since getting those 580s. But it's here. It's here, people. This is an awesome upgrade from your old 7870, from your old... maybe you got a 7950 a year after it came out for cheap. This is better. It has 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's excellent in 1080p, excellent in 1440p, but it's not going to beat the best overclocked yields of a Vega 64, and it's certainly not going to come close to a Radeon 7 for half the price, but it will get to about 75% of a Radeon 7 for half the price. Just don't expect to use it for production tasks. No, it doesn't do NVIDIA's faked version of ray tracing. Oh, I'm sorry, not fake ray tracing. Hybrid ray tracing. No, I don't see ray tracing as anything to buy for future-proofing because the consoles will use an entirely different method, and frankly, eventually this might be able to do some level of ray tracing just like Pascal does, and it'll probably handle it better than that. You know, this is probably going to age well in that regard. In fact, let's talk about aging well, because I just really want to hit this home. Already at launch, you have a card that uses about half the energy of Vega while getting about the same performance. Of course, I'm talking about 14-nanometer Vega. Now, there will be those that will say that's not that impressive because it uses 7-nanometer. Yeah, well, Vega used HBM, and that removes like 50 watts right there. So this is about a doubling in performance per watt right out of the gate, while offering better latency, better frame times, and really responsive gameplay. This is a fantastic card, and it should age, in my opinion, similar to how the 7000 series does. I don't know if this will ever beat Vega, because I do think Vega will also age well, but I think it will probably get past Vega 64 eventually. Probably not Radeon 7. If you can wait, well, I do think prices will drift down. When I saw the 5700 XT and 5700 prices, 400 and 350, I thought, 400, it might drift a little lower, but it'll probably command that price point pretty well, considering that should be about as strong as a 2080, and it is within like 5% of a 2080 for almost half the cost. 5700 XT will probably sit there as a budget 4K gaming card for a while. However, this probably will drift towards $300 if you can wait. But if you can't wait, this is better than anything around it. It is better than just getting a Vega card. It is slightly more responsive, and I mean 14-nanometer Vega cards. It is slightly more responsive, and it uses half the energy while being very quiet. 5700 XT, you're going to want to wait for the AIB fans probably on that. And it sounds like they're coming very soon and won't be marked up. Awesome, right? This one doesn't need it. It's low enough power. The cooler is heavy enough. This feels like a meaty, heavy card. The cooler's fine for this card. Absolutely fine, and you're not going to want to really overclock it too much anyways, so who cares, right? This is a good card. Now, if you can wait, it'll probably drift towards $300. And that's my conclusion. Great card. Proves the 2070 was mid-range the whole time. So, I hope you enjoyed my review of this card. If you did, please share this video, like it, and consider subscribing to my channel. And you know what? Also consider subscribing to my Patreon. The channel's growing quickly, but I'm adding even more. I've got a sound editor coming on. I will be trying to move the podcast, which is incredibly good, by the way, Broken Silicon, all major platforms, into a weekly format. Talk with me on Discord as well if you support me on Patreon. And, of course, thanks again to Timotech, the good old gamer, and thank you to all you fans.